That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. The sun hung low over the Afghan desert, casting long shadows across the training grounds of Forward Operating Base Salerno. Dust swirled in lazy eddies around the boots of the men and women assembled in formation, their uniforms crisp despite the grit that clung to everything. Lieutenant Commander Elias Grant stood at the front, his posture unyielding, the insignia on his shoulder gleaming faintly in the dawn light. At his side, Rex, the Belgian Malinois K9, sat motionless, ears perked, dark eyes scanning the horizon as if the empty expanse held secrets only he could detect. "Platoon, attention!" The command echoed from Sergeant First Class Harlan Reyes, the handler team's lead instructor. Footsteps shuffled into alignment, the faint creak of leather belts and the metallic click of dog tags settling against chests. Grant's team, SEAL handlers and their K9 partners, had been rotating through these drills for weeks, honing skills for the next deployment. The air smelled of dry earth and gun oil, undercut by the faint, musky scent of the dog's fur, warmed by the rising heat. Grant glanced down at Rex, their bond forged over 3 years of shared patrols and silent understandings. The dog had been his shadow since Bud S., a four-legged extension of instinct in a world where human senses sometimes failed. Rex's tag, a simple metal disc etched with his service number and U.S. Navy K9, jingled softly against his collar as he shifted his weight. Grant placed a steadying hand on the dog's head, feeling the warmth beneath the short coat. No words passed between them. None were needed. The exercise was standard, a simulated perimeter sweep, with handlers directing their K9s to detect simulated explosives buried in the sand. Reyes barked orders through a megaphone, his voice cutting through the hum of distant generators. "Handlers, advance on my mark. Maintain visual on your partners. Report anomalies immediately." The team moved forward in pairs, boots sinking into the soft terrain, the dogs straining at their leashes with focused determination. Grant and Rex took point, navigating a mock village setup of weathered crates and camouflage netting. The desert wind whispered through the tents nearby, carrying the low rumble of a Black Hawk warming up on the helipad. Everything felt routine, the kind of disciplined rhythm that defined their days. Grant's radio crackled softly in his ear. "All clear on Sector 2, proceed." He nodded to Reyes, who watched from the observation post, binoculars raised. Halfway through the sweep, Rex stiffened, his nose lifted, nostrils flaring, as he zeroed in on a patch of sand near an abandoned Humvee prop. Grant knelt, unclipping the leash with practiced ease. "Easy, boy, what you got?" Rex's tail went rigid, a low whine escaping his throat. Not the alert for the training simulant, but something deeper, more urgent. The dog pawed at the ground, digging with efficient scratches that scattered sand like falling rain. Reyes approached, his boots thudding heavily. "Grant, wrap it up. That's not part of the drill." But Grant held up a hand, eyes locked on Rex. The dog's persistence was rare. In the field, it had saved lives more than once. "He's onto something, Sergeant. Let him work." The instructor's face tightened, jaw set under the brim of his patrol cap. "Orders are orders, Lieutenant. This is controlled training, not a hot zone. Pull him off." Around them, other handlers paused, their K9s sensing the shift in tension. The wind picked up, whipping sand against exposed skin, and the distant call of a muezzin from a nearby village added an eerie underscore to the standoff. Grant hesitated, his gloved hand hovering over Rex's collar. The chain of command was ironclad, disobey, and it rippled upward, questioning not just the moment, but the man's judgment. Yet Rex's eyes met his, unwavering, a silent plea born of trust. In that instant the routine fractured. Grant's fingers closed on the tag, feeling its cool weight, a reminder of oaths taken and lives entrusted. "Stand down, Grant," Reyes repeated, voice low but firm, drawing the attention of the platoon. Whispers rippled through the ranks, boots shifting uneasily on the concrete pad nearby. The sun climbed higher, baking the sand, and the hum of the helicopter grew louder, as if the base itself held its breath. What Grant didn't know then was that Rex's alert wasn't a false positive. Buried beneath the surface lay remnants of a past operation, artifacts from a mission gone wrong years earlier, one that had cost lives and left questions unanswered. But in the hierarchy of the moment, orders demanded compliance. Grant clipped the leash back on, his movements deliberate, though his hand lingered a second too long on Rex's flank. The dog whined once more, reluctant to abandon the spot. As the team regrouped, Reyes pulled Grant aside near the supply tent, the canvas flapping in the breeze. "You question me in front of the platoon again, and it'll go in your eval." "Understood." Grant saluted crisply, the gesture masking the churn in his gut. "Understood, Sergeant." But as he walked back to formation, Rex at his heel, the weight of that buried tag echoed in his mind. Not just metal, but a symbol of unfinished duty. The morning debrief dragged on in the ops tent, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the scent of stale coffee mingling with sweat-soaked gear. Reyes reviewed the drill, praising efficiencies while glossing over the interruption. Grant sat in the back row, Rex curled at his feet, the dog's head resting on his boot. The other handlers exchanged glances, the unspoken tension lingering like radio static. By midday, as the team dispersed to the kennels, Grant couldn't shake the unease. Routine had its place. But Rex's instincts had pulled them through worse. He knelt to refill the dog's water bowl, the cool liquid sloshing against ceramic. "What was it, buddy?" he murmured, scratching behind Rex's ears. The Malinois leaned in, tail thumping softly against the concrete floor, his loyalty a quiet anchor in the rigid world of ranks and protocols. That afternoon, during a solo review of mission logs, Grant uncovered a redacted report from 5 years prior, a SEAL team lost in these very sands, their K9 handler among the missing. The details were sparse, classified under operational security, but one line stood out. K9 asset unrecovered. Tag ID K9-472. Rex's predecessor. The coincidence gnawed at him, a moral thread pulling against the fabric of obedience. As evening fell, the base settled into its watchful rhythm, patrols rotating out, lights flickering on across the perimeter wire. Grant stood on the edge of the training ground, staring at the spot Rex had marked. The desert stretched endless, hiding its secrets under a blanket of stars. Orders had prevailed that morning, but the defiance simmered, a spark waiting for fuel. In the SEAL ethos, loyalty wasn't just to command. It was to the truth beneath the sand. And Rex, ever vigilant, seemed to know it first. The days following the drill blurred into the relentless cadence of base life at Salerno, where the sun scorched the earth by noon and the nights brought a chill that seeped through tent flaps. Lieutenant Commander Elias Grant moved through his routines with mechanical precision. Morning PT at 0500, followed by gear checks and handler briefings in the ops center. The air there always carried the faint tang of machine oil and encrypted radio transmissions, a reminder of the invisible threads binding them to distant commands. Rex shadowed him without fail, the dog's paws padding softly on the packed dirt paths, his presence a steady counterpoint to the ordered chaos. Grant's team had been reassigned to joint exercises with Afghan National Army units, simulating village clears in the rugged valleys beyond the wire. The SEAL handlers integrated seamlessly, their K9s providing the edge in detection that human patrols often missed. During one such op, as the team advanced through a mock compound under the watchful eyes of coalition observers, Grant kept his focus sharp. "Flank left, maintain interval," he directed over the comms, his voice steady amid the crunch of boots on gravel. Rex ranged ahead on a loose lead, nose to the ground, his ears flicking at every rustle in the scrub. Sergeant First Class Harlan Reyes oversaw the integration, his clipboard in hand, as he noted compliance with protocols. The tension from the previous week's incident lingered unspoken, a subtle undercurrent in Reyes's clipped instructions. Remember, handlers, dogs stay on leash unless EOD confirms. No freelancing. His gaze lingered on Grant, the implication clear. The other handlers, Petty Officer Ramirez with her German Shepherd Luna, and Chief Petty Officer Hale with his Labrador Scout, nodded without comment, their faces set in the disciplined masks of professionals. As the exercise progressed, the group cleared a series of simulated structures, the air thick with the scent of diesel from idling vehicles and the dry, acrid dust kicked up by rotors overhead. A Black Hawk circled low, its downwash flattening the sparse vegetation. Grant felt the familiar pull of command, the weight of ensuring every move aligned with doctrine. But Rex's behavior nagged at him. The dog had been restless since the drill, whining faintly at night in the kennel, as if the buried anomaly tugged at some primal memory. That evening, after the debrief in the tactical tent, where fluorescent maps glowed under red-lensed lights and the hum of generators provided a constant backdrop, Grant lingered over the classified archives. The redacted report from 5 years ago stared back at him, its blacked-out lines frustratingly opaque. The Lost SEAL team had been on a night raid in these sectors, targeting insurgent caches. Their K9, a Malinois named Shadow, had led the breach but vanished in the chaos of an ambush. Asset presumed KIA, the log read, with no recovery noted. Grant's fingers traced the entry, the cool screen reflecting his furrowed brow. Rex's tag ID didn't match, but the coincidence felt too pointed, stirring a moral unease that obedience alone couldn't quell. He confided in no one, not even during the quiet hours in the handler's mess, where steam rose from mugs of reheated chow and conversations stayed surface level. Gear maintenance, rotation rumors. Ramirez caught his eye once, her expression questioning, but Grant shook his head subtly. Loyalty in the teams ran deep, but so did the risks of stepping outside chain of command. Rex, sensing his handler's distraction, pressed close under the table, his muzzle resting on Grant's knee, warm breath a silent reassurance. The test came 2 days later during a live fire certification on the range, the desert expanse stretching out like a vast, unforgiving canvas. The team was arrayed along the firing line, weapons barking in controlled bursts, the sharp crack of M4s mingling with the deeper thud of simulated blasts. Observers from Naval Special Warfare Group logged every round, every handler dog sink. Grant and Rex were midway through their sequence, Rex alerting to a buried training charge when the dog veered off course again toward a eroded berm at the range's edge. "Grant, redirect!" Reyes' voice cut through the radio static, authoritative and edged with warning. The other teams paused, safeties engaging with metallic clicks, eyes turning toward the disruption. Grant's pulse quickened. Rex's body language was unmistakable, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling from his chest. "He's locked on, Sergeant. This isn't random." Reyes strode over, his boots kicking up puffs of sand, face flushed under his helmet. "I said redirect. You're compromising the cert." The wind gusted, carrying the faint metallic scent of spent casings, and in the distance a patrol convoy rumbled past the perimeter, its lights flickering like distant stars. Grant knelt, hand on Rex's collar, feeling the taut muscles beneath. The dog's eyes bored into the ground, insistent, as if unearthing the past was a duty they shared. Around them, the range fell silent, save for the settling dust and the soft whir of a drone overhead. Ramirez murmured to Luna, who whined in echo, while Hale shifted uncomfortably, his grip tightening on his leash. The observers noted the halt, clipboards poised, the moment stretching into potential infraction. Grant's mind raced. Comply, and the certification proceeded smoothly, his record intact. Defy, and it escalated. Questions about judgment, perhaps a formal inquiry that could sideline him before deployment. "Orders, Lieutenant," Reyes pressed, his tone brooking no argument, though a flicker of curiosity crossed his features. The chain of command loomed, a rigid structure built on trust in the collective over the individual. Yet Grant saw in Rex's unwavering focus the essence of their oath, to protect, to detect threats unseen. The buried tag from the old mission surfaced in his thoughts, a symbol of unresolved loss, demanding acknowledgement. With a measured breath, Grant stood, clipping the lead shorter but allowing Rex one more sweep. "1 minute, Sergeant. For the dog's read." Reyes' jaw clenched. But he didn't counter immediately, the witnesses forcing a pause. Rex dug briefly, unearthing not explosives, but a weathered fragment. Rusted metal glinting in the sun, etched faintly with faded numerals. Not a tag, but close enough to stir the air with implication. The rangemaster called time, the certification resuming amid muttered approvals, but the incident rippled outward. That night, in the dim glow of the command post, Reyes confronted Grant privately, the tense canvas walls muffling their words. "You're pushing boundaries, Elias. That fragment could be debris, but if it's more, you report through channels, not improvise." Grant met his gaze evenly, the weight of his rank insignia a reminder of shared stakes. "Understood. But Rex doesn't lie, Sergeant, and neither will I." The conversation ended there, respect intact but strain evident, like a fault line in solid ground. As the base lights dimmed, Grant walked Rex along the perimeter fence, the wire humming faintly under voltage. The desert night enveloped them, stars piercing the velvet sky, the dog's tags clinking softly with each step. The moral pull tightened. Duty to command versus the quiet call of conscience, embodied in the loyal partner at his side. Unbeknownst to Grant, the fragment would soon draw eyes from higher up, turning personal doubt into institutional scrutiny. In the world of SEALs, where bonds were forged in silence, one act of persistence could unearth truths long buried, reshaping legacies one grain of sand at a time. The fragment from the range burned a hole in Grant's pocket as he made his way to the morning briefing, the metal's rough edges pressing against his thigh through the fabric of his utilities. The base at Salerno stirred under a hazy dawn, the air thick with the scent of dew-kissed sand and the low growl of diesel engines firing up for supply runs. Handlers and their K9's assembled in the ops yard, leashes taut, the dogs' breaths visible in the cool air as they sat at heel. Rex positioned himself precisely beside Grant, his flank brushing his handler's leg, a subtle anchor amid the forming ranks. Captain Elena Vasquez, the SEAL detachment commander, presided over the session from a folding table laden with maps and secure laptops. Her voice carried the clipped efficiency of someone who'd logged years in the sandbox, her patrol cap casting a shadow over eyes that missed nothing. "Team, we're greenlighting a joint recon with ANA forces tomorrow. Focus on route clearance, K9's lead detection, no deviations from protocol." She scanned the group, her gaze settling briefly on Grant and Reyes, who stood shoulder to shoulder at the front. The unspoken undercurrent from the range incident hung there, like static on an open channel. Reyes cleared his throat after the briefing, pulling Grant aside near the ammo bunker, where crates of 56 rounds stacked like silent sentinels. The wind tugged at the tops overhead, carrying the faint bark of a distant sentry dog. "That scrap you pulled up, turned it in yet?" Reyes' tone was neutral, but his stance, feet planted wide, arms crossed, betrayed the probe. Grant met his eyes, the fragment's weight a tangible reminder. "Logged it with EOD last night, Sergeant. Standard procedure." Reyes nodded curtly, but skepticism etched his features. Good. Keep it that way. Higher-ups don't like ghosts from old ops stirring dust. He clapped Grant on the shoulder, the gesture firm, almost fraternal, before turning back to his duties. Grant watched him go, the exchange leaving a residue of caution. Rex whined softly, nose nudging Grant's hand, as if sensing the fracture in the chain. By midday, the EOD team had confirmed the fragment, a shard from a K9 harness buckle, corroded but bearing partial etchings that matched the lost asset from 5 years prior, Shadow's unit. The news filtered through secure channels, reaching Vasquez by afternoon. She summoned Grant to her office in the command trailer, the space cramped with filing cabinets and the hum of an air conditioner straining against the heat. Maps pinned to the walls showed faded grid lines from past operations, their edges curling like forgotten promises. "Lieutenant, sit." Vasquez gestured to a metal chair, her fingers drumming once on the desk before stilling. Rex settled at Grant's feet, his ears flicking toward the door. She slid a classified folder across, the red stamp stark against the manila. "This ties to Operation Dust Veil. Team went dark in a wadi 10 clicks east, ambush, exfil under fire. Shadow's handler, Petty Officer Lang, was KIA, dog unaccounted for." Her voice remained even, procedural, but a shadow crossed her face, the weight of unresolved cases universal in their world. Grant absorbed it, the folder's contents aligning with his late-night suspicions. Rex zeroed in on the exact spot, ma'am. "If there's more out there—" Vasquez cut him off with a raised hand, her rings glinting under the fluorescent bulb. "If, that's the operative word. We're not mounting a recovery op on a hunch. Resources are stretched, deployments imminent. Report anomalies through me, not freelance on the range." The order landed like a dropped mag, clear and binding. Grant saluted, the motion crisp. But as he exited with Rex at heel, the moral chasm widened. Duty demanded focus on the present, clearing routes, safeguarding the team. Yet conscience whispered of Lang's family, the closure denied by classified redactions. The trailer's door clicked shut behind him, sealing the directive, but the desert wind outside seemed to carry an echo of unfinished business. That evening, during downtime in the handler barracks, a row of cots under netting, strung with fairy lights for morale, Grant pored over declassified after-action reports on his tablet. The glow illuminated Rex's watchful form curled nearby, the dog's chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Ramirez joined him, sliding onto the adjacent bunk with a thermos of tea, the steam curling like desert smoke. "Heard about the find. Reyes is twitchy." Her voice was low, respectful of the thin partitions. Grant nodded, scrolling to a grainy photo. Lang and Shadow mid-patrol, the handler's grin wide under his helmet. "It's more than debris, Maria. Shadow's tag could still be out there, proof of what happened." She leaned in, her German Shepherd Luna dozing at her side. "Chain says stand down. You push. It could flag your fit rep." The warning was sisterly, born of shared rotations, but Grant felt the pull intensify. Loyalty to the team meant protecting their edge, but ignoring the past risked eroding the trust that bound them. The violation crystallized the next morning during the recon prep, as the team loaded gear into up-armored HMMWVs, the sun baking the tarmac and turning the air shimmering. A local Afghan boy, perhaps 10, with a threadbare shawl and curious eyes, wandered near the perimeter gate. He was a familiar face, son of a base vendor, often scavenging scraps from the scrap heap. Rex alerted first, straining toward the boy with a sharp bark, not aggression, but urgency. The child knelt by a discarded pile, unearthing something small from the sand, a glint of metal that caught the light. "Secure the area," Reyes called, handlers converging as protocol dictated. Grant moved forward, heart rate spiking, Rex pulling at the lead. The boy held out his find, a dog tag, pitted and sand-scoured but legible, K9472, Shadow's ID. Gasps rippled through the group. Hale swore softly under his breath, while Ramirez's hand flew to her mouth. The moment hung public, witnesses everywhere, from ANA liaisons to coalition photographers snapping routine shots. Vasquez arrived swiftly, her boots crunching gravel, face a mask of controlled surprise. "How did you get that?" she asked the boy through an interpreter, who relayed the child's wide-eyed response. "Found it near the old Wadi path, buried shallow." The tag passed hands carefully, its chain broken but the inscription undeniable. Reyes shot Grant a look, accusatory, as if the earlier defiance had summoned this revelation. "This changes nothing for tomorrow's op," Vasquez stated firmly, but her eyes betrayed the ripple. An informal inquiry would follow, pulling strings upward. Grant knelt to thank the boy, slipping him a ration bar through the fence, the child's grin a brief light in the tension. Rex sniffed the tag, whining low, as if recognizing a lost kin. The team dispersed under Vasquez's orders, but whispers spread like radio chatter about the buried past surfacing and the handler who'd sensed it first. In the rigid hierarchy, the find demanded reckoning. Protocol versus the raw truth, unearthed by a child's hand and a dog's nose. As the convoy prepped, engines idling with throaty rumbles, Grant clipped Rex's lead, the tag now secured in evidence lockup. The moral test sharpened: obey the stand-down and let the inquiry bury it again, or advocate for full recovery, risking his command role. The desert stretched ahead, hiding more secrets, and in the SEAL code, integrity meant facing them head-on, even as the chain pulled taut. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach. The sun beat down mercilessly on forward operating base Salerno as the convoy rumbled out the gates, tires churning sand into a hazy veil that clung to windshields and uniforms alike. Lieutenant Commander Elias Grant gripped the door handle of the lead HMMWV, his eyes fixed on the horizon, where the Wadi's jagged folds waited like silent witnesses. Rex sat alert in the cargo space behind him, the dog's harness secured to the tie-down rings, his nose twitching at the rush of dry air through the open panels. The tag, Shadow's tag, now rested in a sealed evidence pouch back at base. But its discovery echoed in Grant's mind, a metallic chime against the engine's steady growl. Captain Elena Vasquez rode in the command vehicle, trailing theirs, her radio linked to the team's frick. "Maintain formation. K9's on point for anomalies. Eyes sharp, no distractions." Her voice cut through the static, firm as the reinforced plating around them. Sergeant First Class Harlan Reyes, in the passenger seat beside Grant, adjusted his NVGs on his helmet, his profile etched with the strain of the morning's upheaval. The find had rippled through the detachment like a seismic aftershock. Handlers exchanged few words during the loadout, but the weight of it pressed on every bootstep. The joint recon with the Afghan National Army stretched into the afternoon, the convoy snaking through scrub-dotted valleys where heat mirages danced off the rocks. ANA soldiers flanked the vehicles in their up-armored Ford Rangers, rifles slung low, their chatter subdued over the shared net. Grant directed Rex during the first halt, unleashing the Malinois to sweep a potential IED site near a dry riverbed. The dog's paws sifted the gravel with precise efficiency, his tail low and focused, unearthing nothing but the faint scent of old explosives residue. "Clear," Grant reported, clipping the lead back on, but his thoughts strayed to the tag's etchings. K9 472, a serial that bridged their present to a buried past. Reyes broke the silence as they remounted, the HMMWV lurching forward over ruts. "That kid's luck changes everything, Elias. Vasquez is already looping in JSOC liaisons. If Shadow's remains are out there, it reopens Dust Veil." His tone held no accusation now, just the pragmatic edge of a man navigating protocols. Grant nodded, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his glove, the salt stinging his eyes. And if they're not, we let it fade into the files again. The question hung, laced with the moral friction that had simmered since the range. Loyalty to the lost demanded pursuit, but chain of command prioritized the mission at hand, clearing routes for safer rotations. By dusk, the team bedded down at a temporary patrol base, a cluster of tents ringed by concertina wire and watch rotations. The air cooled rapidly, carrying the sharp tang of mesquite fires from nearby villages and the softer musk of the K9’s settling into their crates. Grant volunteered for first watch, positioning himself on a berm overlooking the wadi, binoculars scanning the starlit expanse. Rex lay at his side, head on paws, the dog's breaths syncing with the night's quiet rhythm. In the distance, a jackal's yip pierced the silence, underscoring the isolation of their vigil. Vasquez approached after the evening meal, her silhouette cutting through the beam of a tack light, coffee mug steaming in her hand. She settled beside him on a sandbag, the canvas rustling under her weight. Inquiries formalizing. The tag's forensics will confirm provenance, but the boy's story, scavenging near the ambush site, matches the AAR cords. Her words were measured, the steam from her mug curling like unspoken doubts. Grant kept his gaze forward, the wire's faint hum a backdrop. "Ma'am, Rex has been pulling toward that sector since the drill. If we grid search, we might close the loop on Lang and Shadow." She sipped slowly, the mug's ceramic warm against her palms. "Resources, Lieutenant. We're stretched thin with the drawdown." "Adieu," she paused, eyes reflecting the faint glow of the perimeter lights. "Your persistence flagged it. Higher might authorize a micro-op if the evidence holds." The concession was subtle, a crack in the institutional armor, born of her own rotations where losses lingered unresolved. Grant felt the shift, a quiet validation of conscience over rote obedience, yet the cost loomed. Scrutiny on his record, questions about judgment in the field. Dawn brought the return leg, the convoy threading back through the valleys under a sky streaked with rose and gold. Radio chatter filled the cab, position reports, weather updates, but tension thickened when Vasquez's voice crackled over the net. "All units divert to secondary route. Unconfirmed activity in primary wadi." Grant's hand tightened on the wheel as they veered east toward the ambush coordinates from 5 years prior. It wasn't official sanction, but the detour felt deliberate, a nod to the unearthed truth. Halfway through the reroute, Rex alerted sharply from the rear, a series of urgent barks that set the team on edge. Grant pulled over, the HMMWVs forming a hasty perimeter amid boulders and thornbrush. "He's locked on something subsurface," Grant called, unclipping the harness and directing Rex toward a shallow depression. The dog worked methodically, nose to earth, pawing at loose soil until his efforts revealed a glint. Another fragment, this one from a tactical vest, stamped with a faded name, Lang. The ANA troops murmured in Pashto, their rifles trained outward, while Reyes knelt to photograph the site, his flash cutting the midday glare. Vasquez arrived on foot from the command vehicle, her face paling slightly as she examined the find. "Bag it. No disturbance until EOD." The order was crisp, but her eyes met Grant's with a flicker of respect, the moral weight shared now. Witnesses abounded, the ANA contingent, the handlers clustered nearby, even a drone feed relaying to base. Ramirez whispered to Hale. Grant's hunch paid off, her voice carrying just enough to ripple through the group. The public nature of it amplified the reckoning, no longer a private defiance, but a visible pivot toward justice. Back at Salerno by evening, the base buzzed with subdued energy, techs processing the vest fragment in the lab tent, where the air hummed with the whir of spectrometers and the scent of chemical solvents. Vasquez called a snap briefing in the ops center, maps unrolled under red lights, the team's faces illuminated in stark relief. This ties directly to Dustvale. JSOC's green-lighting a recovery detail. Small team. Off books to avoid media splash. Her finger traced the Wadi grid, pausing at Grant. Lieutenant, you and Rex lead detection. Reyes coordinates security. The assignment landed like a commendation wrapped in caution, the room's silence broken only by the soft click of dog tags as the K9’s shifted. Grant saluted. The gesture held a beat longer, emotion restrained in the disciplined line of his arm. Reyes nodded approval, the earlier strain easing into mutual purpose. For the handlers, it marked redemption's first step, their loyalty, human and canine, forging a path through the system's rigid veins. As the team dispersed to prep gear, the desert night deepened, stars wheeling overhead like distant markers. Grant walked Rex to the kennel, the gravel crunching underfoot, the dog's tail swaying with quiet satisfaction. The fragments unearthed weren't just metal. They were threads pulling at institutional memory, demanding accountability. In the SEAL world, where orders defined survival, this act of pursuit transformed defiance into legacy, a handler's conscience rippling upward, mending fractures one buried truth at a time. The recovery op loomed, a test of resolve under scrutiny. But with Rex at his side, Grant felt the bond's unyielding strength, a silent vow against the sand's forgetful embrace. The recovery op launched at 0400 under a moonless sky, the Black Hawk's rotors slicing the chill air with a muffled thrum that vibrated through Grant's chest. He sat strapped in the rear bay, Rex secured in a reinforced crate beside him, the dog's eyes gleaming faintly in the red glow of the cabin lights. The team, 8 SEALs including Reyes and Ramirez, plus 2 EOD techs, hunched in tactical gear, NVGs flipped up as the helo skimmed low over the wadi's contours. Dust devils swirled below, ghosting the landscape like echoes of forgotten patrols. Vasquez had stayed back at base, coordinating from the ops center, her final brief echoing in Grant's ear. Precision only. Recover what you can. Document everything. No heroics. Reyes leaned across the aisle, his voice low against the engine's whine. Grids tight. 2 clicks square around the ambush cords. Rex leads, but we stay buttoned up. Grant nodded, gloved hand resting on the crate's latch, feeling the subtle rise and fall of Rex's breathing. The bond between them felt amplified in the dim confines, a silent pact forged in countless insertions. The Malinois had sensed the pull since the tag's discovery, his restlessness a mirror to Grant's own churning resolve. Duty pulled them here, clearing the ledger on Dustvale, but conscience drove the depth of the search. The risk of unearthing more than fragments. The LZ touched down in a controlled hover, skids kissing sand before the bird lifted off, its downdraft scattering pebbles like shrapnel. The team fast roped into position, boots thudding softly as they formed a wedge around the depression where the vest fragment had surfaced. Night enveloped them, the air sharp with the scent of sagebrush and the faint, metallic tang of dew on exposed rock. Flashlights stayed stowed. Instead, the soft beep of GPS units guided their advance, the perimeter secured by Reyes' fire team fanning out to high ground. Grant uncrated Rex, the dog's paws hitting the ground with eager precision, leash clipped but loose enough for scent work. "Easy, boy," Grant murmured, kneeling to orient him toward the grid's center. Rex's nose lifted, nostrils flaring as he quartered the terrain, his body language a study in focused intensity, tail rigid, ears forward. The team moved in sync, EOD techs probing with ground-penetrating radar. The device's hum a low underscore to the night's quiet. Ramirez flanked left with Luna, her German shepherd mirroring Rex's sweeps, while Hale covered rear with Scout. No words passed unnecessarily. The rhythm was drilled, each step measured against the chain's unyielding protocol. An hour in, Rex stiffened at a cluster of boulders, his whine cutting the silence like a knife. Grant signaled halt, the team freezing in place as the dog pawed insistently at a seam in the rock. Possible hit, Grant reported over the encrypted radio. Voice steady despite the adrenaline spiking his pulse. Reyes approached, thermal imager raised, the screen's glow casting his face in ethereal blue. Dig shallow, mark it for daylight. But as the EOD tech knelt with a trowel, the soil yielded not debris, but a gloved hand, human remains, skeletal fingers clutching a faded morale patch. SEAL Team 3. The find hit like a suppressed round, rippling through the group in held breaths and subtle shifts. Ramirez crossed herself quickly, her lips moving in silent prayer, while Hale's grip tightened on his carbine. Reyes photographed methodically, the camera's shutter clicking like distant gunfire. But his eyes met Grant's with a flicker of gravity, the weight of closure clashing with the ops mandate. Lang, he confirmed softly, matching the bone structure to archived dental records relayed from base. Shadow's handler, lost to the ambush, now partially reclaimed from the sands. Grant's hand trembled faintly on Rex's collar, the dog's warmth grounding him amid the chill. Emotion welled, restrained in the disciplined clench of his jaw, a salute to the fallen, unspoken but felt in the team's collective pause. The moral tension crested. Protocol demanded extraction and exfil, preserving the site for forensics. Yet the dog's persistent circling suggested more, perhaps Shadow's remains nearby, the K9's loyalty extending beyond death. "Rex isn't done," Grant said, voice low but firm. "One more grid, Sergeant, for the full account." Reyes hesitated, scanning the horizon where faint starlight outlined the wadi's rim. Witnesses were everywhere in this tight op. The team itself, the drone feed beaming to Vasquez, even the EOD logs timestamping every move. Defy the timeline, and it flagged as overreach, potentially sidelining Grant's command track. Comply, and the recovery felt incomplete. A half measure that dishonored the bond between handler and dog. 2 minutes, Reyes conceded, his nod curt but laced with understanding. "Then we pull." Rex worked the adjacent sector with renewed urgency, his barks sharp alerts that drew the team inward. The radar pinged again, revealing a shallow, grave-like depression under loose scree. The techs cleared it carefully, headlamps now engaged in the pre-dawn grey, illuminating bones intertwined with a tattered harness, shadows, the collar's buckle matching the earlier fragment. Beside it, a cluster of tags, the dogs, mingled with Lang's personal effects, sand-crusted, but intact. The air thickened with the earthy scent of disturbed soil, undercut by the faint, leathery smell of old gear. Vasquez's voice crackled over the net. "Status," Reyes responded evenly. "Full recovery on both assets, prepping exfil," but the captain pressed, her tone probing the undercurrent. "Elaborate. Grant. Report." He knelt by the sight, gloved fingers brushing the harness, emotion surfacing in the quiet hitch of his breath. "Ma'am, Rex led us to them. Lang and Shadow. Together. It's closure." The words carried the defiance's echo, not rebellion, but insistence on integrity, broadcast to all ears listening. The team secured the remains in body bags, the zippers rasp a somber finality amid the rising wind. As dawn broke, painting the wadi in pale gold, the Black Hawk returned, its shadow sweeping over them like benediction. They boarded in orderly fashion, Rex panting softly at Grant's feet, the crates now holding not just gear, but history reclaimed. Reyes clapped Grant's shoulder during ascent, the gesture bridging their earlier strain, a silent acknowledgement that conscience had sharpened the mission, not compromised it. Back at Salerno by mid-morning, the base's rhythm adjusted to the influx. Forensics teams in the medbay, the air humming with decontam protocols, and the soft murmur of interpreters coordinating with next of kin. Vasquez met the team at decon, her salute crisp as she addressed Grant directly. "Your call on the grid extended the yield. JSOC's noting it for the AAR, exemplary detection under pressure." The praise landed publicly, handlers nodding in quiet approval, Ramirez's eyes shining with restrained pride. But she added, low for his ears alone, "It'll draw eyes upward. Be ready for the board." The reckoning unfolded that afternoon in a closed tribunal tent, canvas walls muffling the desert breeze, the scent of fresh brewed tea clashing with the sterile tang of evidence photos pinned to a board. Vasquez presided, flanked by a JSOC rep via secure video, the screen's glow harsh on their faces. Grant stood at attention, Rex at heel outside the flap, the dog's presence a moral bulwark. "Lieutenant, your deviations, drill halt, range persistence, op extension, bordered on infraction," the rep stated, voice tinny through speakers. "Explain." Grant met the lens squarely, his posture unyielding, words measured. "Sir, Rex's alerts aligned with unresolved assets. Chain of command guides us, but our oath protects the team, living and lost. Ignoring that erodes trust." The room held its breath, Reyes testifying next. His judgment enhanced the recovery. No compromise to security. The moral pivot was evident. Institutional eyes now saw the value in handler intuition, the quiet reforms sparked by one man's stand. By evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the kennels, the tribunal recessed with commendations pending. Grant walked Rex along the perimeter, the wires hum a familiar companion, the dog's tags clinking softly. The fragments, metal and bone, had rippled upward, prompting a review of K9 recovery protocols across commands. Legacy took shape in the subtle shifts. Mentors like Reyes incorporating K9 reads into training briefs, Vasquez advocating for declassification of dust veil for families. Grant's hand lingered on Rex's head, the bond a testament to loyalty's quiet power, transforming personal defiance into systemic strength. The sands had yielded their secrets, but the true test lingered, navigating the scrutiny ahead, where courage under the chain's gaze defined true honor. The tribunal tent felt smaller under the weight of scrutiny, its canvas walls pressing in like the confines of a briefing room after a botched insertion. Lieutenant Commander Elias Grant stood at ease before the makeshift podium, the air thick with the scent of hot canvas and the faint, acrid bite of printer ink from the stacked reports. Outside, Rex waited patiently, his paws shifting on the gravel, a low whine occasionally piercing the muffled proceedings, a reminder of the bond that had driven them here. Captain Elena Vasquez sat at the center table, her fingers steepled over the folder marked Dust Veil Addendum, while the JSOC representative's face flickered on the secure laptop, his expression as impassive as a radar screen. "Proceed with your statement, Lieutenant," Vasquez prompted, her voice level, the gold bars on her collar catching the lantern light. Grant drew a measured breath, the cool metal of his dog tags pressing against his chest beneath the uniform. "Ma'am, the recovery wasn't about deviation. It was about completing the mission for Petty Officer Lang and Shadow. Rex's instincts bridged a gap protocols couldn't. 5 years of classified silence, following orders blindly would have left them buried, eroding the trust we build with every handler K9 pair." His words hung steady, no tremor betraying the churn in his gut. This was the public reckoning, where personal conscience met institutional steel. The JSOC rep leaned forward, the feed's pixelation sharpening his gaze. "Your actions extended the op by 22 minutes per the logs. That risks exposure in a contested zone. Justify it beyond sentiment." Reyes, seated to the side as witness, interjected crisply, "Sir, the extension yielded the full remains. Lang's effects intact, Shadow's harness recovered. Without Grant's call, we'd have half the evidence. No closure for next of kin." Ramirez nodded subtly from her chair, Luna's soft pant echoing from the doorway, while Hale's testimony followed. Team cohesion held, no security breach. The dog's red was gold, saved us from a partial haul. Vasquez reviewed the forensics photos, the images stark, skeletal hands cradling the K9 tag, sand grains still clinging like forgotten oaths. The chain of command exists to prevent exactly this, individual judgment overriding collective ops. Her tone carried the weight of command, but a pause followed, her eyes lifting to Grant's. Yet the yield. It reopens Dust Vale for proper repatriation, families notified by 1800. The concession was procedural, but it rippled, the moral tension easing into acknowledgement, defiance reframed as diligence. The hearing wrapped by midday, the desert sun climbing to bake the tent's roof, turning the interior into a stifling box. Vasquez dismissed the team with a nod toward Grant. "Stand by for formal review." J-Sox ordered in the AR. As they filed out, Reyes fell in step beside him, the crunch of boots on gravel syncing with their pace. "You threaded the needle, Elias, but boards like that mark you." Quietly. Grant saluted the captain's retreating form, the gesture crisp, then turned toward the kennels where Rex waited, tail thumping once against the wire enclosure. Afternoon brought the quiet reform, starting in the handler's ready room, a prefab hut lined with lockers and the hum of charging radios. Vasquez gathered the team for a mandatory brief, maps of the Wadi projected on a white sheet, the air conditioner wheezing against the heat. Dust Vale's declassification partial, enough for families, not media. But this recovery sets precedent. She tapped the screen at the grid coordinates. K9 protocols update. Handlers report persistent alerts directly to detachment command. No more silos. The words landed like revised standing orders. The room's silence broken only by the soft click of leashes as the dogs shifted. Grant felt the shift acutely, his hand absently stroking Rex's flank as the Malinois leaned into him. Ramirez spoke up, voice respectful. "Ma'am, does this mean integrated recovery in AARs?" Vasquez nodded, her expression softening fractionally. Affirmative. Grant's persistence highlighted the gap. K9 intuition as force multiplier, even post-op. Eyes turned to him, not with resentment, but quiet respect. Hale murmured approval, while Reyes jotted notes, his earlier skepticism yielding to tactical evolution. The institutional ripple spread, mentorship formalized, with Grant slotted to lead a K9 integration seminar for incoming rotations. By evening, as the base settled into golden hour routines, patrols swapping out with the low rumble of engines, medics restocking kits under floodlights, Grant walked the perimeter with Rex, the fence wire humming faintly under the voltage. The tag's discovery, sparked by a child's hand and a dog's nose, had transformed from personal unease to systemic tweak. Families would receive closure. Lang's widow, informed via encrypted line, her voice cracking over the speaker in Vasquez's office. Shadow's legacy etched into recovery manuals, a line item ensuring no K9 vanished without pursuit. Yet the cost lingered in the quiet moments. Grant paused at the training ground's edge, the sand still bearing faint scars from the drill where it began. A hand trembled slightly as he adjusted Rex's collar, the metal warm from the day's sun, not fear, but the vulnerability of standing exposed under command's gaze. Loyalty had prevailed, human and canine intertwined, but scrutiny awaited. Fitrep annotations, perhaps a lateral move to training command. In the SEAL ethos, integrity demanded such prices, forging stronger links in the chain. Night fell with a chill wind whispering through the tents, carrying the distant call of night birds and the soft whir of generators. Grant settled in the barracks, the cot springs creaking under his weight, Rex curling at its foot. The tablet glowed with an incoming message from JSOC, commendation pending, review board in 48 hours. Redemption edged closer, the moral arc bending toward legacy, not glory, but quiet reform that honored the fallen. As stars wheeled overhead, Grant scratched behind Rex's ears. The dog's contented sigh, a bridge between duty and conscience, the bond unbreakable amid the desert's vast indifference. The review board convened 2 days later in a secured conference trailer, the air conditioned to a crisp edge that raised gooseflesh under uniforms. Grant entered alone, Rex kennelled for the formality, his absence a subtle ache like a missing limb. Vasquez chaired in person, flanked by a naval special warfare colonel and the JSO's liaison, their faces etched with the lines of countless inquiries. Stacks of reports fanned across the table. Transcripts, photos, thermal logs, the scent of fresh coffee mingling with the sterile tang of dry erase markers. "Lieutenant Commander Grant," the colonel began, his voice gravelly from years of field commands. "Your actions in Dust Vale recovery deviated from protocol, but yielded irreplaceable assets. The tribunal seeks balance, commend or correct." Grant stood tall, eyes forward, the words flowing with disciplined restraint. "Sir, the deviations were calculated risks to fulfill our core directive, account for all team members. Rex's alerts weren't hunches, they were operational intel, overlooked in the original AAR. He referenced the folder, the tag's photo staring back like a silent witness. Vasquez interjected smoothly. "Evidence supports. 100% recovery rate versus projected 40%. No team compromise." The liaison scrolled data on his tablet, the screen's glow reflecting in his glasses. "However, extensions in hostile terrain set precedent. Future ops require pre-approval." The moral tension peaked here, the room's silence heavy as they weighed individual courage against collective safeguard. Grant felt the pull, obedience's safety versus conscience's demand, but held steady, the quiet tremble in his salute betraying nothing. Deliberation stretched into the afternoon, the trailer's windows frosting with condensation from the heat outside. When they reconvened, the colonel cleared his throat. "Findings, actions exemplary under UCMJ Article 92, letter of reprimand withdrawn. Instead, Navy Achievement Medal for detection leadership. Additionally, you're assigned to NSWG Protocol Revision Team. Focus on K9 integration." The words landed like a cleared lane, redemption solidifying in institutional ink. Vasquez's nod held approval, a subtle bridge across ranks. As Grant exited into the blinding sun, the base alive with mid-shift bustle, handlers drilling in the yard, the sharp commands echoing, relief washed subtle, emerging in the even line of his shoulders. Reyes waited by the kennels, arms crossed, a faint smile cracking his facade. "Heard the verdict. You earned it, brother." The team gathered informally that evening in the mess tent, steam rising from trays of MRE-heated meals, toasts raised in water bottles, to the dogs and the handlers who listen. Ramirez clinked hers against Grant's, Luna and Rex exchanging sniffs under the table, the bonds mirroring their own. The reform deepened in the days that followed, Grant's seminar rolling out to new rotations, briefs on K9 persistence, grid search addendums to doctrine. Whispers of Dust Vale faded from classified chatter, replaced by closure letters to families. The tag returned in a shadow box for Lang's memorial. Legacy took root quietly. A revised manual circulated, crediting handler intuition as standard procedure, Rex's photo included as case study. Grant felt the transformation, not as hero but symbol, his defiance a catalyst for evolution within the ranks. Yet vulnerability lingered in the off hours, Grant confiding to Rex during perimeter walks, the night's chill nipping at exposed skin. "We did right, boy." The dog's head tilted, eyes reflecting starlight, loyalty unspoken but profound. In the rigid world of commands and oaths, this chapter closed with strength renewed, the cost of integrity paid in scrutiny, yielding a system tempered by conscience. The sands held no more secrets for them, but the path ahead demanded the same vigilance. Handler and K9 side by side. If this story already has your respect, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elias Grant reach those who still believe in honor. Months passed since the recovery op in the Wadi, the desert's relentless cycle marking time in layers of dust on gear and the subtle shift of rotations at Forward Operating Base Salerno. Lieutenant Commander Elias Grant moved through his duties with a quiet assurance, the weight of the tribunal lifted, but its lessons etched deep. Mornings began as always. 0500 PT, under a sky bleeding pink, the crunch of boots on gravel sinking with heavy breaths, Rex at his heel like a shadow cast by discipline itself. The air carried the crisp bite of pre-dawn chill, mingled with the faint, earthy scent of the kennels nearby, where other handlers prepped their partners for the day's drills. Grant's assignment to the Naval Special Warfare Group Protocol Revision Team had pulled him into briefings at the main compound, a drive across sun-baked roads flanked by razor wire and watchtowers. The team, veteran instructors, EOD specialists, and a veterinary liaison, gathered in a conference room, humming with the low whir of secure servers and the aroma of institutional coffee brewing in a battered pot. Maps from Dust Vale sprawled across the table, annotated with Rex's search grids in red ink, the dog's path a testament to intuition's precision. "Incorporate persistent alerts as trigger events," Grant proposed during one session. His voice steady, marker hovering over the projection. Handlers logged them pre-op, flag for command review. It saved the full recovery, could standardize across units. The colonel presiding nodded, his fingers drumming once on the folder before stilling. "Agreed. Draft it into the manual. Credit the case study to your op." Whispers of approval rippled through the room, not effusive, but professional, the kind earned in quiet competence. Reyes, now collaborating on security annexes, shot Grant a sidelong glance. Respect solidified, their earlier friction forged into partnership. The revisions spread outward, updated field guides disseminated via encrypted drops to forward teams, emphasizing K9 bonds as operational assets, not adjuncts. Institutional justice stirred subtly, the chain of command bending to accommodate the moral edge that had unearthed Lang and Shadow. Back at Salerno, the impact filtered into daily rhythms. New rotations arrived wide-eyed, their briefings laced with Dust Vale anecdotes, told not as legend, but procedure. Ramirez led a session in the handler yard, Luna sitting alert as she demonstrated alert protocols, the sun glinting off her whistle chain. "Watch the dogs read. If it pulls like Rex did, you report it up. No second guessing." Hale echoed the point during gear checks, Scout nosing at a training simulant, his voice carrying over the wind's low moan through the tents. Grant observed from the sidelines, Rex's flank warm against his leg. The transformation evident in the handler's stances, less rigid, more attuned, loyalty extending beyond obedience to shared conscience. Vasquez summoned Grant to her office one afternoon, the trailer's air conditioner rattling against the midday heat, stacks of declassified reports fanned like playing cards. Lang's family received the effects last week. The widow wrote, said the tag closed a hole she'd carried for years. Her tone held no sentiment, just fact, but her eyes met his with a nod of acknowledgement. JSOC's auditing similar cases. Your medal pins next month, but that's secondary. This, she tapped the stack, ripples to policy. K9 recoveries now mandatory in AARs, no redactions on assets. The reform was quiet, procedural, yet profound. A system learning from one handler's stand, vulnerability acknowledged in the rank's unyielding structure. Grant's own legacy took shape in mentorship, slotted to oversee incoming SEAL handlers at Coronado upon rotation home. Evenings found him in the kennels, reviewing logs under the soft glow of LED lanterns, the scent of wet fur and kibble a comforting constant. Rex leaned into his scratches, the Malinois' eyes half-lidded in trust, their bond the unspoken core of it all. "You started this, buddy," Grant murmured, fingers tracing the tag on the dog's collar. Now polished, a symbol of vigilance reclaimed. The cost had been scrutiny's glare, evaluations annotated with cautious praise, but integrity's yield outweighed it. Careers steadied, not derailed. The moral courage becoming a benchmark. As deployment wound down, the base thrummed with packing lists and farewells, helicopters chopping the air with final resupplies, their shadows sweeping over the training grounds like departing ghosts. Grant walked the perimeter one last time at dusk, the wire fence humming under fading light, stars pricking the indigo sky. The Wadi's secrets, once buried, now informed the path ahead, duty refined by compassion, orders tempered by the quiet breath before a dog's alert. He paused at the spot of the first drill, sand undisturbed but memory vivid, Rex's whine a distant echo in his mind. Transformation settled in him, not as triumph, but resolve. A soldier symbolizing strength within the system, where loyalty to partner and truth outlasted the sand's erasure. In the quiet of that final patrol, Grant saluted the horizon, the gesture held steady, a vow to carry the legacy forward. Honor forged in defiance, enduring through the ranks. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching The Case of the Seal Never Returned to That Battlefield until a child found the K9's tag buried in the sand. See you in the next one.